What led to the Gulf War? The story begins, not in 1990, but much earlier, with the end of another brutal conflict, the Iran-Iraq War. After 8 long years of fighting, Iraq was exhausted. Its economy was in ruins, its infrastructure shattered, and it was burdened with immense debt. Iraq had expected its neighboring Gulf states, especially Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, to provide substantial financial aid for reconstruction. After all, Iraq saw itself as having defended the Arab world from Iran. But the help that came was far less than what Iraq anticipated, and this disappointment quickly soured relations. Compounding this problem was a severe economic crisis fueled by falling oil prices. In the late 1980s, global oil markets were flooded, causing prices to plummet. Iraq, heavily dependent on oil revenue for its recovery, pointed the finger directly at its neighbors. It accused Kuwait, in particular, of deliberately overproducing oil, exceeding the quotas set by OPEC. From Iraq's perspective, this wasn't just an economic disagreement. It was an act of economic warfare, a direct assault on its ability to rebuild and stabilize. The frustration and anger in Baghdad were palpable, as they felt their so-called allies were actively undermining their recovery. Then there were the historical and territorial disputes, which added another layer of complexity. For years, Iraq had asserted historical claims over Kuwait, arguing that during the Ottoman Empire, Kuwait was part of the province of Basra. These claims, rooted in colonial-era border drawings, were a persistent source of tension. Iraq viewed Kuwait's independence as an artificial creation by British imperialists, designed to deny Iraq full access to the Persian Gulf. This long-standing grievance about borders and sovereignty simmered beneath the surface, ready to boil over when combined with the economic pressures of the time. The dispute wasn't just about land. It was about national pride, historical identity, and strategic access to the sea. With economic desperation and historical grievances converging, the situation reached a breaking point. On August 2, 1990, the world watched in shock as Iraqi forces invaded and swiftly occupied Kuwait. This aggressive move was the final trigger, the decisive act that transformed a regional dispute into a global crisis. The international community reacted immediately and forcefully. The invasion was a clear violation of international law, and it sent shockwaves through the geopolitical landscape, threatening the stability of the entire Middle East and the world's oil supply. The occupation, though brief, set the stage for a massive international response and was the direct catalyst for the Gulf War. In the wake of the invasion, there was a frantic flurry of diplomatic activity. The international community desperately tried to find a peaceful solution. High-stakes meetings were held, including a notable conference in Geneva where U.S. and Iraqi officials met. But diplomacy hit a wall. Iraq remained defiant, refusing to withdraw its troops and insisting that Kuwait was now its 19th province. The inability of diplomats to find any common ground or broker a compromise only heightened the sense of impending conflict. Each failed negotiation made a military confrontation seem more and more inevitable. The window for a peaceful resolution was closing fast. As diplomacy faltered, a powerful international coalition began to take shape. Led by the United States and sanctioned by the United Nations, this alliance was unprecedented in its scope. It brought together not just Western powers, but also several Arab nations, including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Syria, who felt threatened by Iraq's aggression. The coalition's stated mission was clear: to enforce on resolutions demanding Iraq's unconditional withdrawal and to restore Kuwait's sovereignty. This alliance began by imposing strict economic sanctions and a naval blockade, aiming to cripple Iraq's economy and isolate it politically. It was a massive buildup of political, economic, and, ultimately, military pressure. When the UN deadline for Iraq's withdrawal passed on January 15, 1991, the military phase began. The coalition launched Operation Desert Storm with a devastating air campaign. For weeks, coalition aircraft and cruise missiles relentlessly pounded Iraqi military targets, command centers, and infrastructure. The goal was to dismantle Iraq's air defenses, disrupt its communication lines, and degrade its ability to fight. This air war was one of the most intense in history, showcasing advanced military technology like stealth bombers and precision-guided munitions. The skies over Iraq and Kuwait were completely dominated by coalition forces. After more than a month of intense aerial bombardment, The ground war began on February 24, 1991. The strategy was a massive, sweeping maneuver designed to encircle and cut off Iraqi forces in Kuwait. Coalition ground troops, including tanks and armored divisions, stormed across the border from Saudi Arabia. The Iraqi army, already demoralized and weakened by the air campaign, offered far less resistance than anticipated. The ground offensive was swift and decisive. In just 100 hours, coalition forces liberated Kuwait City and forced the Iraqi military into a full-scale retreat. The war ended with a decisive victory for the coalition, reshaping the political map of the Middle East and leaving behind a complex legacy that continues to influence the region today. Welcome back to our deep dive into modern history. Today, we're exploring the final stages and lasting impact of the Gulf War. Let's pick up where the coalition's ground offensive began. The advance was stunningly fast. Coalition forces, a powerful mix of air and land power, moved with precision and speed, liberating Kuwait City in a matter of days. Faced with such overwhelming strength, the Iraqi army, which had been battered by weeks of aerial bombardment, began a chaotic retreat. By late February 1991, the occupation of Kuwait was officially over. For Iraq, the military defeat was catastrophic. Beyond the immense human cost, its military was decimated, and critical infrastructure across the country lay in ruins. This swift and decisive end to the fighting, however, was just the beginning of a new and difficult chapter. So, when we look back, who bears the primary responsibility for this conflict? Most historians and analysts point to one figure, Saddam Hussein. As the absolute ruler of Iraq, his decision to invade Kuwait was the direct trigger. Of course, the situation was complex. Iraq was grappling with enormous debts from its long war with Iran and felt immense economic pressure. But while these factors created a tense environment, they didn't make invasion inevitable. The choice to use military force was a deliberate one made by Iraq's leadership, turning a regional dispute into a global crisis. It's a classic example of how individual decisions at the highest levels can have devastating consequences. The structural issues were real, but the pivotal turning point was the order to cross the border. To fully understand the context, we need to appreciate the web of issues at play. Iraq's post-war economy was in shambles, and the government was desperate for cash. This desperation fueled its anger over Kuwait's oil production policies, which Iraq claimed were driving down prices and hurting its revenue. Add to this the historical disputes over borders, specifically access to the Persian Gulf, and you have a recipe for conflict. The entire Gulf region was a chessboard of competing interests. Each nation had its own agenda regarding oil, security, and influence. This fragile geopolitical environment didn't cause the war on its own, but it certainly provided the flammable material. Tensions over oil prices and production quotas were not just economic disagreements. They were seen as direct threats to national stability, making the whole region a powder keg waiting for a spark. The end of the fighting didn't mean the end of hardship for Iraq. In fact, it was the start of a prolonged period of suffering. The United Nations imposed severe international sanctions, aiming to contain Saddam's regime and ensure it couldn't threaten its neighbors again. But these sanctions had a devastating effect on the Iraqi people. The country's economy collapsed, leading to widespread poverty and a breakdown of public services like healthcare and education. For over a decade, ordinary Iraqis endured immense hardship beyond Iraq's borders. The war redrew the political map of the Middle East. New alliances were forged, and the military presence of Western powers, particularly the United States, became a permanent fixture in the region. This shift dramatically altered the balance of power and set the stage for future conflicts and ongoing instability. The Gulf War offers some profound ethical and historical lessons. It's a stark reminder of how quickly political decisions can spiral into regional chaos. The dispute over oil and territory could have been a matter for diplomats, but instead, it became a matter for generals. This highlights the critical importance of robust diplomatic channels and a commitment to negotiation to resolve international disagreements peacefully. On the other hand, the swift and unified global response to the invasion set a powerful precedent for collective security. The UN-backed coalition demonstrated that the international community could act decisively against aggression. This event became a cornerstone of what was then called the New World Order, shaping how future crises would be handled. Ultimately, the war underscores the need for transparency and cooperation among nations to prevent such conflicts from ever happening again. Even decades later, the Gulf War isn't just a distant historical event. It remains highly relevant. Many of the core issues that fueled the conflict, disputes over borders, control of oil resources, and the struggle for regional dominance are still major sources of tension in the Middle East today. For policymakers and diplomats, the war serves as a critical case study in crisis management, intervention, and post-conflict strategy. For researchers and students, it provides invaluable insight into the complex interplay of economics, politics, and military action. The lessons learned, both from the successes and the failures of the intervention, continue to inform debates about international law, national sovereignty, and the responsibilities of global powers. Reflecting on this history helps us better understand the world we live in now. So, to summarize the key themes we've covered, the path to the Gulf War was paved with a combination of factors. Severe economic pressure on Iraq after its war with Iran, combined with long-standing political tensions over oil production and territorial claims, created a volatile situation. The invasion of Kuwait was the critical act that crossed a line, prompting an unprecedented international response led by a massive military coalition. The war itself was swift and decisive on the battlefield, leading to the liberation of Kuwait, but also the devastation of Iraq's military and infrastructure. The conflict's aftermath profoundly reshaped Iraq's future, placing it under crippling sanctions, and it permanently altered the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. It remains one of the most significant and studied events of the late 20th century, a conflict whose echoes are still felt around the world. The human cost of the Gulf War was immense, creating staggering hardships for civilians in both Iraq and Kuwait. During the Iraqi occupation, a significant portion of Kuwait's population was displaced, forced to flee their homes and become refugees in their own region. They faced uncertainty and loss, a trauma that would linger long after liberation. Meanwhile, in Iraq, the civilian population bore the brunt of international sanctions and the widespread destruction of infrastructure. The war crippled the country's ability to provide basic necessities, leading to severe shortages of food, clean water, and medicine. Hospitals struggled to function, and daily life became a battle for survival. In response to this unfolding humanitarian crisis, international organizations like the Red Cross and various United Nations agencies ramped up their efforts. They worked tirelessly to deliver aid, set up refugee camps, and provide medical care. But the scale of the suffering was vast and overwhelming. The war left deep scars on the societies of both nations, a painful reminder of the true price of conflict, which is always paid most heavily by ordinary people caught in the crossfire. The Gulf War is often called the first television war, and for good reason. It was one of the very first conflicts to be broadcast live, 24/7 parties across the globe. News networks like CNN brought the battlefield directly into living rooms, offering unprecedented, real-time coverage. This constant stream of information fundamentally changed how the public perceived and understood warfare. Instead of waiting for newspaper reports or edited evening broadcasts, people could watch events unfold as they happened. This immediacy had a profound impact on public opinion and political decisions. Governments had to react not just to events on the ground, but to the public's reaction to what they were seeing on their screens. The iconic images of tracer fire over Baghdad or press briefings from military commanders became defining moments of the conflict. This non-stop coverage demonstrated the rising power of televised media in shaping the narrative of war, influencing international sentiment, and setting a new precedent for how future conflicts would be reported and consumed by a global audience. Beyond the human and political toll, the Gulf War left a devastating environmental scar on the region. As Iraqi forces retreated from Kuwait, they enacted a scorched earth policy, deliberately setting fire to over 600 Kuwaiti oil wells. The result was an environmental catastrophe of epic proportions. Thick, black smoke billowed into the sky, creating a toxic plume that blotted out the sun for months and could be seen from space. This massive air pollution had severe impacts on air quality across the Gulf, leading to respiratory problems and other health issues. The fires also released vast quantities of crude oil, which pooled into massive oil lakes, contaminating the desert soil and groundwater. Some of this oil flowed into the Persian Gulf, creating one of the largest oil spills in history, devastating marine ecosystems and coastal habitats. The cleanup was a monumental task, requiring years of international cooperation and billions of dollars. Firefighters from around the world were brought in to extinguish the blazes, a dangerous and difficult job that took nearly 8 months. The environmental damage became a major post-war concern, highlighting the long-lasting and often overlooked consequences of modern warfare on our planet. The end of the Gulf War marked a significant turning point in the political landscape of the Middle East. The conflict didn't just end a military engagement, it fundamentally reshaped alliances and power dynamics throughout the region. One of the most immediate outcomes was a push among the Gulf states for greater security cooperation. The invasion of Kuwait was a wake-up call, prompting countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates to strengthen their defense partnerships, both with each other and with Western powers. Meanwhile, Iraq's military defeat and subsequent isolation severely weakened its position as a regional power. This created a power vacuum that other nations, particularly Iran, sought to fill, altering the delicate balance of power that had defined the Middle East for decades. The war also solidified long-term alliances between the United States and several Gulf monarchies, which in turn influenced diplomatic and military strategies for years to come. These shifts laid the groundwork for future conflicts and diplomatic negotiations, and the ripple effects of these realignments are still being felt in the geopolitics of the region today. In the aftermath of the Gulf War, ensuring regional stability was a top priority for the coalition forces. To prevent a resurgence of conflict and protect key interests, a new security architecture was established in the Gulf. This wasn't just a temporary measure. It marked the beginning of a long-term, significant military presence. Coalition powers, led by the United States, maintained strategic positions throughout the region to deter any renewed aggression from Iraq and to safeguard the world's most critical energy supply routes. Military bases were established or expanded in countries like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, transforming the security landscape. These arrangements were primarily focused on two goals: protecting the free flow of oil and ensuring the stability of friendly regimes. This foreign military presence became a defining feature of the post-war era, embedding Western military power deep within the Middle East. While intended to provide security, it also became a point of contention and a complex geopolitical factor that would shape regional politics, alliances, and conflicts for the next several decades. Thanks for watching, and if you found this deep dive interesting, be sure to like and subscribe for more historical analysis.